The deal is final. The Spurs will send Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green to the Raptors for DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a 2019 first-round pick. League sources tell me the Raptors and Spurs are getting on a trade call with the league office momentarily to finalize the deal.
Woj, that sounds like an awful lot. What might be a one-year rental?
I'm a fun guy. Obviously, I love the game of basketball. I mean, it's just more questions you have to ask me in order for me to tell you about myself. I just can't give you a whole spiel. I don't even know where you're sitting at.
And that's going to do it. The Toronto Raptors, for the first time in franchise history, they've won 4 in a row in the postseason.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger? Game! Series! Toronto has won!
Toronto, this was the 100th playoff game in franchise history. And with that win, for the first time ever, Toronto is heading to the NBA Finals.
Crowd still here hoping for a miracle. Also here to cheer on. Leonard makes it official. Now the Warriors just inbound, and that's it. There's a new NBA champion, and it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions. The Raptors, the 2019 NBA champs.
Well, Kawhi Leonard has made his decision just minutes ago. Our Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that Kawhi Leonard is going to join the Clippers here in Los Angeles. He's informed the runners-up teams of his plans. That would be the Lakers and the Raptors. Leonard coming off an NBA title with the Raptors in his only season in Toronto. Southern California native headed back home here to play for the Los Angeles Clippers.
How about a first-timer? Pascal Siakam of the Toronto Raptors, his first All-Star selection in his 4th season, averaging 24 points a game. That's number 15 in the league, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 10 30-point games in the previous 3 years.
Day of free agency full of action, and the big players were on South Beach. Miami Heat working towards completing that sign and trade to bring Kyle Lowry from the Raptors. The 2019 champion is expected to snag a 3-year deal.
With the 4th pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Toronto Raptors select Scottie Barnes from Florida State University.
Wow. Scottie Barnes becomes the 3rd Toronto Raptor in the history of the organization to win Rookie of the Year. Here's Barnes, straight down the stretch. Scottie Barnes, the player, man. He is a big-time player.
Scottie, fall away, go!
Just like that. He impacts the game in a variety of ways. His defense really is special for a young.
Born August 1st, 2001, in West Palm Beach, Florida, Scottie Barnes ended up being the 4th overall pick in the 2021 NBA Draft for the Toronto Raptors. Just a year removed from winning Rookie of the Year, people are already starting to doubt him again. Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. Now, first off, I do want to preface the thumbnail and potentially the title are a little bit clickbaity. I didn't mean to go overly clickbaity, but I don't think Scottie Barnes can be a number 1 on an NBA team, but in no way do I think he's a bust. I think he has developed into a player that is one of the best young players in all of the NBA, and truly is a guy that you would want to try to build a team around or be a central piece in what you build to try to win a championship in today's league. And I want to preface that right off the bat because, he's a phenomenal player, right? This guy already has a slew of awards in his young career, between winning Rookie of the Year, being on All-Rookie First Team, and then going back to college, He was third-team All-ACC. He was ACC Sixth Man of the Year, ACC Freshman of the Year, and obviously a McDonald's All-American prior to college, right? So he has had success at every level of basketball that he's played so far, and I only expect that to continue. I did want to, kind of add that little bit of element of, is he terrible? Do I think he's terrible, right? No, I don't. I don't think he's terrible, right? This last season, we saw him average 15 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists on 45% from the field and 28% from 3. He played 77 games, and he didn't really change from his rookie year, is really kind of my big question marks with him, right? He will be going into his age 22 season, his third year this year, and this is really going to be a huge year for him because the Toronto Raptors, have a lot of trade rumors, which we'll get to here in a minute, but, they've thought about building a team around Scottie Barnes. I mean, even just 6 to 8 months ago when Kevin Durant was requesting out of the Brooklyn Nets for the first time, there were people saying, I wouldn't trade Scottie Barnes for Kevin Durant, right? Which personally I think is kind of wild, because I don't think he'll ever be at the likes of a Kevin Durant. And I don't think that's really crazy to say, right? But this next year is going to be very important for him because what we need to see is that jump to, can he be a number 2 scorer on a championship team? Can he be a number 3? Because obviously he brings it defensively. Obviously he hustles. He has, the ability to get in the lane. He's athletic, etc. His shot is still lacking, right? Obviously only shooting 28% last year. 28% from 3, 29% from 3 on his career. And so that's definitely something that's still lacking and that needs improvement. And I think his, creation, right? His own shot creation, has, I would say that's improved, but not to a substantial point where, he's necessarily considered a go-get-it guy, right? He's not going to go get you a bucket all the time. Which if you want to build a team around a guy, especially in today's game, they have to, bottom line, be able to go get their own shot. Now, his playmaking is great for his position, especially. His rebounding is very good. And like I said, his defense is right there. When we look at what he did last season defensively, he averaged almost a block per game and over a steal per game, along with, he's guarding the other team's best player, whatever, right? Obviously, we know what he is defensively, and that's really where he makes his mark as one of the best young players in all of basketball, right? But yeah, this year's going to be super important for him, especially if we see the Raptors move on from the likes of Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby or whatever they do, right? Maybe they keep them. But if this team wants to be anything more than, a 6 to 12 seed, he has to take a jump. And there's no other way around it, right? This team can't be better without Scottie Barnes being better. And obviously, I think year 3 is when we see a lot of guys really take a huge jump. I think the biggest example in probably the last decade would be like CJ McCollum. Wasn't fantastic his first couple of years. Once he got to his third year, he exploded, and I want to say he became a 20-point per game scorer in his third year, after averaging 5 the years before that, right? So your third year in the NBA is huge. It's really where we kind of start to see who this player is going to develop to be, right? If Scottie Barnes doesn't develop past 15 or 18 points per game even this year, and we don't see that shot start to click or some more creation really start to click, if you don't see the more of the glimpses, amplified, especially in the third year, then it starts to become worrisome, especially for top picks, on how good they can be, right? Because I think regardless, bottom line, say Scottie Barnes doesn't improve anymore for the rest of his career. First off, he's going to end up with a rookie max because he won rookie of the year, and he's still going to have the potential, right, to improve. So he will have generational wealth by minimum, which is amazing for him, right? Shout out to him for putting in the work on and off the court to get to that level, right? But say he doesn't improve any more past what he is now, he will be in the league for the next decade as at least a role player. You know what I mean? He'll be a starter probably on a championship team. It's one of those things where he's so good defensively, and he's still, it's not like he is a black hole on offense. He averages 15 points per game. He is able to score. But yeah, he'll be a crucial part of the NBA for, the next 10 years, probably, towards the likes of a Lamar Odom at worst, right, is where you're looking at for his career to project at this point. And I don't think that's bad. Now, obviously, they're different players, but you get what I'm saying when I come to, level of their career that they would be at. But yeah, I definitely still think he has the opportunity to improve, the ability to improve, and the right mindset to improve. It's just, will we see it? And like I said, that really kind of comes down to him and just how he ends up performing this year. But he's not the only player on this team, and he's not the only guy I wanted to talk about. Now, this team has obviously a lot of other players on this team, but the main two guys that you think of past Scottie Barnes are going to be Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. Now, they did acquire Jakob Poeltl back at the trade deadline last year, who I think is going to be solid for them. He is only 27. He'll be 28 this year. He's a former top 10 pick for the Toronto Raptors, right? Obviously moved in the DeMar DeRozan trade for Kawhi, reacquired this last season. For really not a ton. I mean, they sent the first round pick back. They sent Kem Birch in 2 seconds, but not a ton. And I think he'll be a serviceable center for them for the next, rest of his contract, if not longer. Currently, how long is he under contract for? He is under contract. Not sure. Let me double check that. Well, he's making $20 million a year, and then he's under contract until the 2026-2027 season, which he has a player option that year. So he'll be here, right, for at least the next 3 years, and I think that's perfect for this team. You don't have to look to improve center. He's gonna be exactly what you need, and especially with the cap going up, that $19 million is just gonna look less and less on the books as things go on, right? Now, if somehow a better center came available, I would not say don't go try to trade for Joel Embiid if you could go get Joel Embiid or something like that, right? Obviously that would be insane. But yeah, bringing back Jakob Poeltl will be key for this team. Now, that's a guy that they brought in. Let's talk about some guys they've talked about, shipping away. Pascal Siakam this last season averaged 24 points per game, 7 rebounds, and pretty much 8 rebounds and 6 assists. We'll round up for him. On 48% from the field and 32% from 3. Obviously, we know he's a multiple-time All-Star at this point. One of the better development stories over, the last half decade, if not decade, as, it really took him a little bit to get onto the scene after being the first overall the first round pick at pick 27 for the Raptors in 2016. But where we didn't really see him hop onto the scene was until 2018-19, in which he averaged 17 points per game. And then he became an all-star in 2019-2020, where he averaged 22 and has not looked back since from the 20-point per game mark, right? Obviously, he's the best player on this team, and we know that at this point. He can play offense, he can play defense. One of the better development stories, like I said, and just wasn't a guy that we necessarily thought was going to develop into who he is now after averaging only 4 points per game in his rookie season. And then OG Anunoby, you should be familiar with him if you're watching this video, I would hope. But yeah, obviously the first round pick for them in 2017, 23rd overall, averaged pretty much 17 points last year, 5 rebounds and 2 assists on 47% from the field and 38% from 3. It is interesting. I did see a report that Toronto does not want to move on from him, and we'll get into kind of more of how concrete that evidence seems to be. But every other team wants him, right? So Toronto doesn't want to move on from him, whether or not they trade Pascal Siakam, because they believe with Siakam, he's a good enough player that he contributes to them still being a playoff team. And even without Siakam, they believe that, him only being just now 26. So happy late birthday to you, OG. With him just being now 26, he still fits the timeline of their team, which makes total sense because, like we said, Scottie Barnes, being their primary young talent, is about to turn 22. So OG's only 4 years older than him. And that's not crazy, right? OG would be 32 when Scottie Barnes is 28, which is how old Jokic is, right? So if you want to put it in that perspective of getting to, towards your peak of basketball, is typically between like 26 and 32 is typically when I say players are going to enter their peak. It's different for every player, but that's typically probably about your average, right? And then you start to see a decline after that for players that aren't named LeBron James, because we know he'll just play until he's 50 at this point, right? But yeah, I mean, OG we haven't seen another jump from him since 2020, 2021, when he was 23 years old. He started off slow in the league and has developed into one of the better perimeter players offensively and defensively in the league, averaging pretty much 15 to 17 points per game for the last 3 seasons. But like I said, he hasn't had a jump, beyond that, which I think the Raptors might still be holding out hope for, which he's not too old for that to happen, right? Obviously just entering where you would consider an average peak to start. And so it's possible. And, when you look at cases like Victor Oladipo and such, players have late in their career, balloons in not necessarily talent, but on-court performance, right? And I think he definitely has the talent to do it. Will he do it? I would say probably don't. I would say what you have with OG, he could maybe get to a perennial 20-point per game score, right? Push a couple more points, a little bit better percentage. But what he is now, I think, will be probably what he is for the rest of his career, which is not a bad player, right? I understand why you wouldn't trade him. Now, what I don't understand is why you wouldn't trade him for 3 first-round picks, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to look back at the Pascal Siakam trade things, because this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, right? Pascal Siakam is, I think, the more likely to be traded. Now, he has said that he wants to stay in Toronto, which is good, right? If you're Toronto, because you can still field offers, but still feel comfortable that he's going to, stay with you and such. With his contract being, I want to say this is the last year on his contract, where he'll be making $37 million. So he'll be 30 years old next year. We'll see if they re-sign him. But like I said, because he said that he wants to stay there, that does give you kind of leeway as a team where, you can field offers to potentially get younger and really build around Scottie Barnes, and maybe try to find a second guy or a guy that can be that number 1 on a championship team. Because let's face it, Pascal Siakam can't be a number 1 on a championship team. OG can't be a number 1 on a championship team, at least offensively. And Scottie Barnes, I don't think, can be a number 1 on a championship team offensively, right? All of these players are fantastic defensively. And, you take Scottie Barnes out of the equation, you put him with Kawhi Leonard, and they win a championship, right? Now, obviously, you had Kyle Lowry and such and whatever, right? But these are very, very good players. Yet, Pascal Siakam intrigues what you could get back. A lot of places that he's really been mocked to are the Hawks, the Mavs, the Pelicans, the Pacers. I haven't seen as much interest reports from the Pelicans, but I have seen people mocking him to the Pelicans, whereas the other 3 teams have shown, credible interest in trading for him. I think the most interesting would be the Dallas Mavericks or the Atlanta Hawks. Just because of the fact that they're both win now teams, a little bit more than the Pacers, who are still kind of a young up and coming team, who, if you guys want to see more of my thoughts on, I did just post a video about them a little bit ago, and you guys can go check that. I'll make sure that I link it down low in the description. But yeah, I think the Hawks or the Mavs would be probably the most interesting options. He just provides, defense that their top star players don't necessarily provide, right? Now the Hawks do have DeJounte, give him respect where his respect is deserved defensively. But Trae Young is one of the worst defensive players I've ever seen play basketball. And I watched Isaiah Thomas play basketball and almost win an MVP with no defense, right? And then, that same kind of testament can be attributed to the Mavs, and why they fell out of the playoffs last year, which again, I also have a recent video on them as well. But yeah, I think, it gives you the ability to get a guy like a DeAndre Hunter back. It gives you the ability to get a guy like a Josh Green back, who neither of those guys I see as a number 1 on a championship team, but it's another young guy that maybe you can develop a little bit more. Maybe you flip later down the line. If you get one of those guys that is good defensively, and has offensive potential still, and they develop past OG, then maybe OG is a little bit easier to move. So it just gives you more flexibility with a younger core, right? Which I think makes total sense. Pick-wise, I don't know how many you'd get back with Pascal being on the last year of his deal. That we'd just have to wait and see until the trade actually happened, for what that compensation would necessarily look like. As for, what the media thinks, they don't, that I guess your major media sources, they don't necessarily believe that the Raptors will trade Siakam unless they get a established player is the key word to keep them as playoff contenders. Which I do think like a DeAndre Hunter would be something like that that you would consider. Now, if the Hawks still had John Collins, that would be interesting as well. But they don't, right? They traded him for a bag of chips. But yeah, now back to the OG thing. Obviously, pretty much every team in the league has wanted to get OG Anunoby. He just fits perfectly along any star player that you can think of. And especially when you look at his contract, it's not like he's being crazy overpaid. Like Siakam's being paid $37 million. You gotta, penny up some guys, even just for cap filler, just to get him. OG's only making $18 million. He's on a fantastic contract. He does have a player opt out this offseason, so we could, if he doesn't, like his role with the Raptors, he could leave, which I do think fuels some of those rumors. So he'll get paid again. I think he'll decline that. It's only for $19 million. He's definitely worth more than that. But yeah, I mean, he fits alongside pretty much any player in the league, and that's exactly why you'd want to go get him. Similar kind of thing, he would work great in Cleveland. I've seen some mocks with the Mavs. Obviously, the Pacers have a famous offer on him from this last season, which we'll talk about. But I mean, pretty much any team that you can think that would try to be competitive, he'd be fantastic on, which is why I completely make sense that the Raptors don't want to trade him. Now, this is where it gets a little weird to me, is at the deadline last year, it was reported that not only did half the league, or approximately half the league, according to Bobby Marks, submit offers for Anunoby. He wasn't traded, but also the Memphis Grizzlies and the Indiana Pacers both offered 3 first-round picks for OG Anunoby. I don't care how much you like OG Anunoby if you're the Raptors front office. You trade him. You trade him for 3 first-round picks, because that's on the level of like an all-star player, especially if you got somebody back, because he makes decent money. You would have got something back beyond just the picks. Now, obviously, I haven't seen what the offer was that was submitted, but you would have got something else back, even just to match the money. And you have to do that. I'm baffled that they didn't do that. But like I said, I also get why they'd want to keep him. Yeah, 3 first-round picks goes a long way. Now, there is the argument of, well, the draft is, unknown. You don't know what you're going to get out of the draft. And that's a fair argument to make in that regard. But you could also just package those 3 first-round picks for a better player than OG Anunoby. I'll put that straight up. I mean, if Jaylen Brown, who obviously just got a massive extension with the Boston Celtics, if in a year he wants to go take over his own team, which wouldn't necessarily be unprecedented for young stars as of recently, the Raptors would have been a perfect suiting place for him, which I guess with OG they still could be. But yeah, that's crazy. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Now when it goes to the rest of the roster, they do have other young guys that they definitely think that they can build around, especially if Pascal's moved on from. Honestly, if I'm the Raptors, I move on from Pascal Siakam. It sets me up the best for the future. I'm not going to win a championship right now. And if their goal is to still stay competitive and keep attendance, which I think they'll keep attendance regardless, the Raptors fan base, especially since winning that championship, is one of the most diehard fan bases that I've ever seen in all of sports. And for that, I have to credit you. I mean, you guys, it's crazy. The Raptors fan base will have you thinking that Delano Banton is going to be an MVP player by just the pure amount that they're going to talk about, like a 2nd-round pick. Now he's no longer on the team. And I assume Christian Kolokolo will just be the next guy in that, chain of 2nd-round picks where the Raptors fan base just gets enamored with, and I'm sure we'll have to hear about it for a little bit. Now, if they prove something, they prove something, but obviously 2nd-round picks don't always turn into something, and that's coming from a guy who's a Nuggets fan and has watched Jokic win multiple MVPs in the championship, right? I think hyping up a 2nd-round pick is, to that extreme that I've seen some people do, is a little bit wild. And I would point at the Raptors fan base, especially when it comes to hyping up 2nd-round picks. But like I said, I do respect the dedication and how much that they really ride for their organization, win or lose. Now back to the young players that they have. They have Grady Dick, who they just drafted in this last draft. They also have Precious Achiuwa, who did not take the jump I was hoping that he would take this year for them, and then Malachi Flynn. Now Grady Dick coming in, he's their 13th overall pick. Good shooter out of Kansas. And in Las Vegas in the summer league, we saw him average 16 points per game on 28 minutes. He didn't shoot it great. He shot 40% from the field and 29% from 3 on almost 7 attempts from 3. He had 2 assists, 6 rebounds, 1.5 steals, and a quarter of a block per game in 4 games played. So that's kind of what you're looking at with his summer league performance. I expect him to probably be a little bit more impactful once it gets to the regular season, just because I expect that shooting to probably pick back up a little bit. And then, I don't know, he came with some swag to the draft. I think he'll be at least a serviceable player for them. I doubt that he would be a guy that fizzles out of the league super quick. Beyond that, like I said, Precious Achiuwa, he last year averaged 9 points, 6 rebounds, and almost an assist per game on 48% from the field and 26% from 3. The former first-round pick of the Miami Heat, traded back in the Kyle Lowry trade, or sign-in trade. I was hoping that he would take a bigger jump this last year. Now, he didn't necessarily play a ton of games. He only played 55 games, only started 12. The lowest games of his career for games played. Technically, he averaged a career high in points, but it was essentially the same as the year before. And so we'll see if he continues to develop from that. If not, he's a serviceable backup center for, years to come, which is not bad. Good defensively. As for Malachi Flynn, he's a former first-round pick for the Raptors, drafted in 2020 with the 29th overall pick, and he averaged 4 points last year, averages 5 points on his career. He's inefficient, shoots 36% from the field. I don't think he'll ever amount into anything beyond what he is. He's already almost 26 years old. And honestly, I would expect once his contract's up, him no longer to be with the Raptors. But somebody that is going to be with the Raptors for the foreseeable future, most likely, is Darko Rajaković. I hope I said that right. I looked up the pronunciation of it. He is their new head coach after they fired Nick Nurse, and a lot of people seem to think that he can really bring something different to this team, which could be huge when we're talking about Scottie Barnes needing to potentially take that year 3 jump. Getting a head coach who has, at this point, almost a decade of experience of assistant coaching in the NBA alone, and from a video that I was watching, he said that he almost has 20 years of professional coaching experience. So since he was in his early 20s, he was professionally coaching over in Serbia. He becomes the second Serbian-born head coach in NBA history. So shout out to him for helping break that barrier for Serbian players. I saw Jokic speak out about that as well and give him his flowers as well. But yeah, they didn't do the typical, I guess they did the typical Raptors when it comes to signing a head coach. They didn't do the typical for the rest of the league where we saw Nick Nurse get fired from here and go straight to the Sixers. We saw Monty Williams get fired from the Suns and go straight to the Pistons. Whereas Darko was an assistant coach. Was he assistant coach for Memphis last year? Yes, an assistant coach for Memphis the last 3 years. Phoenix before that, and OKC for 5 years before that. And so he's been around, an elite level player in Kevin Durant. He's been around an emerging young star in John Morant. And from, the reports, it seems that he really kind of brings that team basketball, and he's really going to focus in on that, which is very different than the Raptors have played the last few years, because when you watch them, they just throw out a bunch of 6'7", 6'8" guys that can defend and occasionally hit a 3, and they're all athletic and say, go play basketball. They'll run out there with no point guard, right? Delano Banton, who we've now talked about twice in this video, would run out there as their point guard at 6'7", and then their center would be Precious Achiuwa at 6'8", and that would be their, your in-between lineup would be Scottie, Pascal, and OG. And it would just be just go play defense and get in the fast break. Which, worked for them to a point, right? But I think Darko is going to, from the reports, and obviously I haven't seen him coach, and so we'll see. First-year head coaches, you really tell pretty quickly if they're going to be good or not. Especially with the success of the team. And it's not like he has bad players, so they should be successful if he is a good coach. But I think, he'll just bring something more to this team and hopefully allow them to kind of take a different direction or another step in which it allows them to just develop Scottie Barnes and develop this young core and kind of move into the next generation of Toronto Raptors basketball, right? Obviously, only being 44 years old, he's like 4 years older than LeBron, so he can coach for the next 40 years and still not be as old as Greg Popovich, who just signed an extension, right? So if he's fantastic, that's an amazing hiring for the Raptors. And so far, I think he seems to be a really great character guy and a guy who's been around basketball for pretty much his entire life, right? Now, when we look at some other non-young players that this team has, and when we're talking about this team being currently competitive, I think, the number one guy that I didn't mention so far that people have probably screamed at me in the comments about is Gary Trent Jr. Averaged almost 18 points per game last year. He's only 24. I don't feel like he's young, though, just because I don't see him progressing from where he is. And what he is a very good player. Shot 36% from three last year, 43% from the field. Played 66 games, and after being a second-round pick, developing into what he is now, just shout out to Gary Trent Jr. For really, making the most of his career to this point. And yeah, I think he'll continue to be a good player. He fits their timeline. I could see him getting packaged in a trade away if they went after a star or something like that. But I don't think they would ever trade him away to get younger because, like I said, he's only 24, and I don't think they'd ever trade him away to get shooting or defense because he provides that. So there's no need. And yeah, I think he'll be a staple of this team for at least bare minimum, probably the rest of his contract, which does not run out until, I have the numbers here. Oh, actually, it runs out this year. He exercises the player option. I totally forgot that because everybody thought that he was going to not exercise his player option. Yeah, so he is back. I think he'll be great for this team. We'll see if they re-sign him. And yeah, shout out to Gary Trent Jr. Beyond that, we have Otto Porter Jr. Obviously, battled injuries last year, but played with the Warriors when they won the championship just a couple years ago and was fantastic for them. Only played 8 games last year, so we'll see what he can do with the Raptors this year. Again, fits that 6'7", 6'8" defensive, offensive build that this team is just made up of, right? Chris Boucher is kind of a fit that build again at the power forward or center situation. Averaged almost 10 points per game last year, played 76 games, has been a staple on this team for the past few years, 30 years old now. So we'll see what he provides, but he's been a staple role player for this team over the past few seasons. And then the last guy I really want to talk about today is Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder obviously famously turned down that contract with the Los Angeles Lakers, now comes to the Toronto Raptors to be their starting point guard. Really kind of taking over the reins as having to be a true starting point guard. Obviously he was in Los Angeles, but really for the first time since back when he was with the Atlanta Hawks, when he was super, super young. He's 29 now. He'll be 30 here pretty soon. And last year he averaged 12 points per game. I'd expect that to probably go up. I could see him averaging 15 for them. He's never been a elite playmaker, but with so many options around him and other guys being good playmakers, I don't think that's going to be bad, especially with that team-oriented basketball look. Averaged almost 5 assists last year, averaged almost 5 assists on his career. And yeah, I think he'll be a good addition to this team. So this team should be competitive. I expect them to be about the play-in. If they move on from Pascal, they could push lower in the standings. If they keep him, maybe they go higher in the standings, upward of like I said, kind of a ceiling of a 6 seed. But yeah, I expect this team to be competitive and interesting. Now Scottie Barnes, like I said, is the key piece here, and will he become a franchise player? That's really only for time to tell. In my opinion, I don't think he'll ever be able to be the best player on a franchise that wins a championship. But what do you guys think down below? Let me know. I always love to hear you guys' comments down below and interact with you guys. I really appreciate all the support recently on the videos. But that's going to be it from me. And yeah, I will catch you all next time. Peace out, guys.